reality. So I think that's the optimal way to go, and I think that's what the status quo really is. It is a slow death, and then when you
Right,
die, it's a surprise.
but that works for an individual that's slowly dying. But when you're talking about an economy, what's going to happen is when it does accelerate, when it gets to a point that it is accelerating, and then the collapse comes, we're creating the conditions where our kids or our grandkids are the ones that are going to have to suffer for our foolishness.
No, I agree. It's not responsible. You know, I know, I don't know if you've ever actually started a business, but I have launched and started many different businesses, and it is not easy. And anyone on this stupid app who, is for government borrowing and spending and has never actually started a business, all they've ever done is be an employee or some federal wage earner their whole life. They have absolute, and Elon Musk said this in a speech when he was helping Trump. He said, people have no idea how hard it is to create value, real value, and to make a profit, let alone with all the regulation and compliance you need to adhere to successfully run a business. A good example would be a pizza parlor. It's a very simple business. You make a pizza, you warm it up, you sell a slice of pizza, or you sell the whole pie. Most people will never in their life ever create any kind of business, that's an actual storefront. Maybe they'll have some kind of digital shop or something, but it is very difficult to actually start a successful business that's legal and that's not deceptive or fraudulent. So to think that we're fucking 37 trillion in debt, spending $1 billion an hour, and there's no recourse. That's why I say there have to be some kind of debt resolution, an agreement, a meeting of the minds between the borrowers and the lenders, aka our elected representatives. So, I'm just saying maybe there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe. This is what I was going to ask you, Mojo, is do you think the Federal Reserve and dollars and debt is actually just another form of political communication? Because it's my belief that we don't have to fear dollars or money. It's all essentially communication. When we start stabbing each other and shooting each other over debt, okay, then we have a civil war and we have a problem. But in the meantime, do you think it's basically political rhetoric?
No, it's not just that. I think there's more to it. I think that it's it's just a problem that we've delayed, where we're going to delay dealing with the problem, and so I don't think it's just communication. I think it's an action which we're going to be waiting for the reaction, and I think the reaction is going to be pretty scary.
Well, what is the reaction of the Federal Reserve or of the US government? I mean, and do you think there is an actual separation between those two organizations?
They claim that there's a separation, but there certainly is a lot of influence. I mean, these conversations between Powell and Trump have been illuminated. If it's separate from the federal government, then why does the president have so much goddamn influence over it? I'm in the Fed camp.
Well, I like how Trump says, Chairman Powell's a very angry person. So, he's punking him and he's doing a great job of it. But he didn't budge. He didn't drop the rates. Why does one guy and supposedly his board of governors get to determine this artificial rate? Why can't we have a market rate? So it's an artificial system. It's a monopoly, and it's, do as you're told. And that's what it is. It's a cartel, and it's, we gave them their charter to do it. I mean, why can't Congress and the American people get behind revoking their charter and return the power of the purse strings, to our elected representatives as opposed to an unelected, cartel? I mean, did you ever vote for a chairman of the Federal Reserve? I never have. I would like that opportunity.
Hold on, American, though. I understand the argument behind it being a cartel and that, but do you think that giving that money being issued by decree of Congress is a sensible alternative? I mean, yes, they're democratically elected, but can you imagine the shenanigans?
But I would rather own.
The way money creation.
I would rather own the personal responsibility of that debt and not have this double jeopardy or this, uh, you know, opportunity to do currency manipulation. I mean, there's no ethics, there's no morals. It's literally $1 billion an hour. That's what they're spending, but they're only taking in, a fraction of that. So it's none of this is in the Constitution. It's not in our primary charter. We're doing a lot of extra shit that there's absolutely no authority to do. And we seem to have given away the authority as if it's a right or they're guaranteed this authority. There's no guarantees to these authorities. It is the will of the people.
So who do you think's more at fault here? If we had to point blame, would you throw it all the way back to Woodrow Wilson and the creation of these systems, or would you blame Nixon for taking us off the gold standard?
No, basically, philosophically speaking, the now is this compression. So the Constitution wasn't written in 1776. It's written now. The charter for the Federal Reserve is written now. All these things can be changed now. And so I think, with Nixon and the gold reserve, the interesting thing about Nixon is if you look at the stock market growth, Nixon is the only US president that the stock market didn't have a positive year and great growth. Clinton had the greatest growth. So what does that tell you? The Federal Reserve was doing quantitative easing, is most likely doing quantitative easing during the greatest stock market growth periods, which is the inflation of the money supply. Only under Nixon did the stock market not have a great, annual return on investment. It's because he didn't inflate the money supply. So there's a lot of illusion when it comes to the stock market. If the Federal Reserve wants to increase the money supply, they just start buying equities and everybody's portfolio goes up and then people start liquidating and getting cash out. So there's a lot of manipulation that the Federal Reserve does. And when they tell Congress, don't give us monetary policy advice and we won't give you fiscal advice, this is a private cartel. It's totally in the shadows. All these meetings, none of this is on the record. They have no transparency and they're totally shielded from elected representatives doing any kind of forensic auditing or accounting on their behalf. They don't have an outside accounting firm or an auditor coming in to audit them because they control the politics. This is why I say it all goes back to political communication. The dollar is really a network of communication. The dollar is a communication instrument primarily. The Federal Reserve creates nothing. They don't manufacture anything. So what are they really doing as an organization? They are a communication organization. That's their primary goal. That's what they really do, which is communication. And Chairman Powell has some he has bad moments where he lets shit slip and he's angry and he pretends like he's this robot that just says these are our primary tools of intervention. Have you ever heard him speak? He speaks. It's politically accommodating for him to speak like a robot, to pretend like he's not even a real human being, because if he slips up and he gets angry and he gets frustrated and all that kind of lets the American people know like something here isn't right. That this doesn't seem to be natural. This isn't organic. This isn't in our founding charter and in our Constitution. So again, that's why I say now is all important. We need to put the spotlight on the Federal Reserve and flood it with light so we can get more transparency into who they are, what they're doing, and the syndicate with the Congress. I mean, this is like a RICO trial. Like all these fuckers should be brought up on RICO charges for being involved in a conspiracy. They're spending money that we're not taking in, and we're not voting for this. It's totally unrepresented taxation. It's anti-American. It's anti-constitutional. I mean, I'm not even a fucking lawyer, but this is my opinion.
Adam, what do you?
I mean, yeah, it's a bloody mess. I think I think debt jubilees are interesting ideas. I don't understand the West's, and this goes back to ancient times. The West's infatuation was serving the creditor class at all costs. We're willing to bankrupt individuals, communities, states, nation states to serve these interests. It was common practice to have debt jubilees. Sometimes it was it was periodical, over several decades, maybe 70, 75 years, or when a king or a monarch would die, there would be a debt jubilee. These were fairly common practices, but in the West, we've been resistant to this idea, and we've been captured and basically in service to a creditor class almost in perpetuity since time immemorial. And I don't know. I understand that, like, oh, well, this is, the system will fail, and how will anyone, how will capital be created and lent and distributed and all this stuff. But I think we're so far down the rabbit hole. I think we do need to think outside the box. I don't think resetting and having limitations on timelines of debt is necessarily the worst case scenario here. I think we're beholden to these interests, and we self-sacrifice in order to serve them, and I think it's foolish.
Let me say one thing. I don't know if any of you have ever done sports book betting, but I know somebody here in Chicago that had a private book, and I witnessed the immoral behavior that happens when you have a private debt book. And so try to view it from the perspective, the Federal Reserve is a bookie. And as Americans and our elected representatives, we keep going back to this bookies and saying, listen, can I borrow I want to borrow more money. And the bookie's like, you want to borrow more? Okay, great. We'll lend you more. No problem. The Federal Reserve will always continue to loan our government this money that we vote on in these acts and in these omnibus bills. So again, this is like a gambling addiction problem that we have as voters, as citizens, as constituents. We have to stop going to the bookie and cut all business relationships and ties with this bookie that is more than happy to continue lending to us. I mean, I think that's probably a good reframe and a good way to try to understand this very toxic relationship between our Congress, our government, which continues to borrow daily, hourly with the Federal Reserve as if they're an addicted gambler. But the last piece of that is, if you believe that the Federal Reserve is nothing more than a communication organization, well, okay. Well, the problem is when a bookie wants to collect and you don't have the money, they're going to give you death threats, and you're going to have to go to friends and family and say, please lend me this money. Otherwise, this bookie is going to break my hand or kill me. So, if you believe that Hollywood story about a bookie. Anyways, I'm just saying, I don't know what the results will be. That's why I say it's possible there's resolution, and this is all just a fucking Ponzi scheme and fictitious. But nobody's going to get hurt because the government or the United States of America isn't going to collapse because Washington, D.C. is never going to get invaded. That's why I'm saying it's like if we do kick the can down the road, it's to the detriment. I've heard people on this app, international investors, complain about our budget because they're like, yeah, you're cutting into my investment now with your inflation, and you guys are getting the biggest benefit of it. But the thing is, a lot of the money that Congress is allocating is not coming back to we the people. It's not giving us jobs. It's not giving us economic opportunity. It's giving a lot of international organizations that opportunity with the money. And we can't stop sending money overseas. Jordan, Egypt, everybody's still getting a cut of this budget. So to me, it's traitorship. How the fuck are we sending Jordan $500 million and Egypt, $100 billion? I mean, what the State Department sends out annually, thank God it's been cut, but to give Ukraine $50 billion and more weapons from our arsenal. maybe we don't need the weapons and we just make new weapons. I'm just saying, the more we can accurately describe the situation and the relationships, the sooner we can stop borrowing and spending and run this business, at an optimal rate.
I think it's hard for people to want to engage with public policy in a responsible, realistic way. And maybe that's the first change that has to happen. I think we've become too used to dealing with public policy in terms of these big themes, liberation and whatever else, and not really thinking about like, oh yeah, the public policy is mostly about running an economy, But I'm not sure how to refocus people on that.
I think they need the tough love. We have to tell them that Medicare and Social Security someday are both going away.
Well, why do people on this say, "Oh, I paid 20 years into Medicare. That's my right." It's not like they're getting a cash payout. Like Social Security, you could at least, you could calculate your ROI, but you can't even calculate an ROI with the Medicare, Medicaid. And the fact that people put all this money into Social Security, I don't know if you saw that in the big beautiful bill, there's this provision, and Scott Bassett of the Treasury says that it's a backdoor to end Social Security because they're giving all newborns $1,000 investment in like some kind of federal S&P 500 tracking account. I don't know who is the service provider on that, 401k, but the point is, that could be the beginning of getting people off of future Social Security liabilities, or doing away with it altogether. So it's a possibility, but it is, at $1 trillion a year. I mean, that's serviceable. We're taking in $5 trillion. Okay, so we're kicking back out $1 trillion in Social Security. But Medicare and Medicaid, that's the big one. And that's where we're not really getting a good return on our investment at $2 trillion. The health outcomes suck. Nobody goes to the gym. Nobody eats right. Everybody's on their fucking cell phone 24/7. Everybody is obese. Everybody has a clot shot. And we're just going to keep dumping $2 trillion into a healthcare system that doesn't work. And why is the government creating the healthcare system to begin with? This is not the way that reality should be. Government and taxation and spending and borrowing shouldn't create health marketplaces and health exchanges. The government should not be in this business of funding these organizations. To me, it blows my fucking mind how we got to where we're at now, that the government is the sole provider and creator of all of these economies. It's insane. I don't understand how we got here, but it's obvious we got here because of the Federal Reserve and our ability to continue creating insane budgets annually. The King of England doesn't necessarily have the same ability that we do. I don't know if you've ever seen how the Queen or the King presides over their budget. He's got his royal scepter and he says, the annual fucking budget is going to be $2 trillion. Next year, it's anticipated to be 2.1 trillion. It's a little different. They don't have this huge credit card terminal that we seem to have with the Federal Reserve. But the question is, who's in control of this credit card terminal? Is it your elected representative or is it a consortium of global interests? It's the fucking global interests that are controlling our purse strings.
Well, I mean, there'll always be a factor as long as they own our debt, and they own our debt basically to pay for stuff from us or other people because of dollar denomination and stuff like that. I mean, are you saying the Bank of England is different? It doesn't have the same leeway or latitude? I mean, central banks have a lot of leeway.
No, I mean, the fact that our dollars, if you look at the total amount of dollars in circulation globally, they don't even come close in terms of pounds. So we have this huge monopoly with the dollar. I think the best way to say that debt resolution comes about is really through a political communication. And trying to get good deals for we the people. I mean, I think Trump is the guy to get us good deals, but I think he's also a runaway, spendaholic. I mean, We got COVID-19 Heroes Act, CARES Act with him. So he didn't say, oh, we need, there was this national emergency. We got to spend another trillion, another 3 trillion, 2 more trillion. I mean, to keep the economy afloat, but we haven't gotten off of that heroin addiction. 40% of our economy is still borrowed. That's an artificial economy. If we cut the spending and cut the borrowing, the economy completely disappears. It's almost like the VIG or the profit, from this asset or from this investment is the $2 billion or the $2 trillion that they borrow on our behalf to fund the budget. That's 2 trillion of pure profit annually. You have to try to rationalize or try to compare the budget to, let's say, Microsoft at a $4 trillion market cap. If we're spending 7 trillion a year, I mean, do you realize how big Microsoft is globally and what that is in terms of the global communication grid and productivity, et cetera? Like, you can't the amount of money that the government is spending is it's inordinate. It's insane. It's so fucking huge, but the whole economy rests upon it. It's a huge fake fucking economy. It's one giant Ponzi scheme essentially globally, or if you just focus on the US, it is a fucking Ponzi scheme.
Well, I mean, it's all backed by real goods in the end. I mean, people get their iPhones, they get their North American Angus, they get their Ford Fiestas, real things really do happen.
Well, you ever see the movie Casino with Joe Pesci? They had a skim going, and that's pretty much what's happening. Is there is a skim happening at the casino, and it's the Federal Reserve and their associated banks. I mean, they're chucking out $1 trillion a year. We're paying $1 trillion on the interest. That's going to a lot of international lenders. I'm not anti-bank. I like bankers. I wish I was more juiced into the banking industrial complex. I worked in financial services as a financial advisor for Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. It's my first job out of college. I wish I would have stayed in there. I had no idea how good the opportunities were, but I'm not trying to be some kind of patriot to destroy, the banking industrial cartels and the banking industrial complex. I'm just saying that if you're running in politics, this should be your number one issue. I was telling Black Lives Matter people, you're protesting the wrong people in the wrong organization. Your dumbasses should be at the Federal Reserve doorstop, preventing people from going into work at the Federal Reserve facilities around the country. That's your real enemy if you believe in all this white structural racism bullshit that you propagandize. So all I'm trying to do is be intelligent and accurately describe the players or the situation and try to come up with optimal solutions that work for everybody. I think that's fair.
Well, Mojo, what do we do? What do you say to that?
In the Fed.
What do we replace it with? How should the central bank?
Nothing.
No central bank.
I have. Well,
hold on. So no central bank, Mojo. So we're just gonna go back to the Jews. Is that what it's gonna be? Straight up, unintermediated. The Jews in London, all of their gold. That's what it will be. The banking system. He left, and he's pulling his leg.
I have an old currency note, and it's printed by the Republic of Chicago or the Bank of the Republic of Chicago. It's not printed by Federal Reserve. So that monopoly, that I think that would be the way, Jason, to replace the Fed is to remove their monopoly on printing dollars, or go back to a gold standard and have it fixed to actual gold. I mean, what do you think about that, Jason?
I mean, it's not good to fix to gold because you need more currency than you have gold, basically. The currency supply really has to do with the amount of trade that you have going. But what you're talking about with the Chicago Reserve or whatever is an intermediate step. But I'm not sure it would be a stable situation. Just say if you have this kind of government entity issuing money, I mean, eventually that's going to get all under the control of the government as a whole. You know, in the same way that, I mean, we have police forces all over the country, but to some degree or another, they're centralized in their training and doctrine. And that's just gradually become more the case, you know. Like a decentralized system, I was sort of joking about the Jews and their gold, but the way the English system worked actually was not Jews, but was goldsmiths in London. That's like the root of the Bank of England. Why? Because, well, you can give them notes and they can issue you notes that they back with gold. They know how to store gold. They have a lot of gold. There's a lot of gold around, you know. And so that's a safe place to issue notes out of. And that's the kind of the origin of banking as we know it. Has to do with the issuing of these notes at market fairs, things like that. Because people don't want to carry around all this stuff to every stall in the market. So, but then you end up with a bunch of private banks, right? Do we want to privatize the currency issuing and holding function? I mean, there are massive problems with that.
Well, you know, I think this is basically art, to tell you the truth. I don't think that the system will change, and I think the status quo is like 99.99% guaranteed. But I still like find it fun to try to do, you know, thought maximization or creative uh, ways to suggest alternative uh, ways to grow, you know, grow the economy, start new. I mean, if we can start new businesses, why can't we start a new country? You know, like, I don't know. I mean, there should be an alternative opportunity for people to invest in a new, you know, separated future from this social security number index. Um, so I don't know. There seems to me like we should have tax-free economic opportunity zones. You know, 50 years of tax-free growth opportunities in certain states. You know, maybe within the interior. Um, you know, and funded for $100 billion and plant 10 new cities in this country. Because if you look at the top cities in China and you look at the annual budgets of the top 20 cities in China and you compare it to the top budgets of like New York City, LA, we spend like 1/10 of what they're spending in Chinese cities. And I don't know if this is because of their communism, but just compare the budgets of the top 10 US cities to the top 10 Chinese cities, and you'll be like, I mean, I know there's a lot more people, but how the fuck can they still spend 10x what our city budgets are? That to me was like a crazy metric. I can't, I don't know what they're spending all the money on, if it's all just salaries or subsidies. But welcome to the room, Dr. Vadim.
Hello, hello. Yeah, I mean, I think you know, your picture of tax-free zone or country, for that matter, is very inspiring. But I think, you know, I'm totally for it. But I think it's much more a political decision than economical. I mean, call me cynic, but I think the fundamental problem of democracy is that, you know, sorry to be rude, but most of the people in democracy are leeches. They basically are freeloaders. They have political power to vote, to dictate taxation policies, and they are not the least interested in tax-free zones because that means that they cannot basically suck